Chapter 36. Now I know that you came to these lectures to learn about killing monsters and becoming a better adventurer, but today's lecture is about the races. No need to groan, kiddos, this is important information for any adventurer. Many of you will travel to exotic places and meet all kinds of individuals, some of which won't be human. So you need to know the basics of how to interact with them. Since all of you are humans, I think anyway, I'm not about to strip you and check. We are going to mostly skip talking about humans in this overview. The races are divided into humans and sapiens, and confusing the two is a good way to get yourself killed. Humans are monsters. They have classes and they can be as smart or smarter than you, but they level their species and evolve. Sapiens, on the other hand, do not have a species level but can take many more classes. The sapient races are humans, elves, dwarves, and any half-breed between them. Despite what you might think, there isn't a superior race. Among the sapients anyway, half-elf and Dragonkin are qualitatively better than pretty much everyone else, but rather each race has its own talents and flaws. Humans gain experience much faster than any other race or monster. If you feel that you aren't leveling fast enough, you aren't working hard enough. What takes an elf 100 years to do might take the average human only 10 years, while a talented and determined human might do it in 1. Of course, elves can afford to spend 100 years gaining a level. Those rumors of elven immortality you have undoubtedly heard. They are pretty damn accurate. Elves naturally gain vitality over time, so they never actually grow old. They also have monstrously large health pools and can survive injuries that no human would. If you stab an old elf in the heart, they can just pull it out and walk away without a care in the world. And they very well might, because the oldest elves tend to become less and less interested in the world as they age. Eventually, they stop moving altogether and enter a meditative trance called reverie. These ancient elves in their reveries rarely ever interact with the world again, completely uncaring about their surroundings. People can have walked up and slit their throats without them bothering to react. For the record, slitting their throats came nowhere close to killing the ancient elves. Part of a lecture from S-rank adventurer Dre the Massacre given to new adventurers. Ray Marsalilipov. Just didn't think we would be traipsing up and down hillsides to hunt toads of all things. Ilma was complaining as she blasted another juvenile boreal toad away. These things are hardly even a threat, so what is the point? They pay in gold, the normally quiet Carlin growled out as he skewered one of the smaller hatchlings on his sword. That is the only point that matters. Well, of course they pay in gold. Evergold is a gold mining town. Gold is the only thing they have. If it helps Ilma, there is a good reason to have us do this. I interject before Ilma can start ranting again. Even though these monsters are weak, they serve to give experience to stronger ones. The more experience in the ecosystem, the more powerful monsters it can support. So if we cull the weaker monsters, we prevent the more powerful monsters from evolving. Ilma was able to figure out the rest from what I had told her. Giving her just enough to figure things out for herself was much better than telling her something. Ilma would argue against anything that she hadn't thought of herself. That might be true, but I'm with Carlin here. Chow Earl, who was doing absolutely nothing but standing by watching us kill swarms of toads, said. Do we really need a reason beyond, they pay in gold? We'd be unlikely to get silvers for work like this anywhere else, they'd pay us in coppers. Nah, this wouldn't be a copper's job. Rovan didn't even bother to stab the smaller ones, dispatching them with a single kick instead. Sure, the lower stages are just trash, but the babies have to come from somewhere. The adult boreal toads would be a threat to many adventurers. One of them could kill me, for sure. Tamling spoke up, taking a moment to wipe his brow. Most people don't have Rovan's durability or your firepower, Ilma. It certainly was true that we had expected a bit more out of the savage south, but I can't say I am disappointed to have an easier time than I had thought I would. For that matter, we were only a couple of hours out of Evergold. For all I knew, there were rampaging elementals right over the next hill. If you have this swarm handled, I certainly thought they did. Toads were hardly dangerous for adventurers like us. I will scout ahead and get an idea of the lay of the land. Rovan waved me ahead and I dodged away from the toads and ran off into the trees. I might not have an advanced class, but with both the hunter and scout classes and my elven heritage it was easy to fade into the forest and avoid fighting the monsters that prowled around. Our party was out on a basic 3-day clearing quest. We would travel 1 day away from the town, kill everything we could find for a day, and then come back. We would have to take a trophy from every kill and turn them in at the local guild to get our pay, and this kind of job usually paid poorly except in very dangerous regions. This was, supposedly, a very dangerous region and Evergold had gold to spare, so we could expect a very nice paycheck for our efforts. Personally, I planned to use the money we earned here in Evergold to receive training in becoming a tamer, as the class would help me in my goal to become a ranger. It was far more efficient to have a professional train me in the class than it was for me to just abduct a toad or something and try to teach it how to behave. That was a few decades away though. It would take time to learn the class and I wanted to stay with my party for as long as they were adventuring. I might be young and yet to feel the weight of time on my shoulders, but I knew well enough that a decade or a century here or there wasn't really important. I would still be considered barely above a child by other elves long after my current comrades were dust. For the most part, my scouting was uneventful. Although the further out I traveled the more dangerous the monsters were. The town guard likely helped to clear the areas around the town itself. Stone lynx were some of the most common and in some places I even saw wisps, which meant there had to be a place with a very high mana density somewhere nearby. Wisps themselves weren't particularly dangerous, but their presence could mean that elementals and elemental monsters might be nearby. I was fairly sure that was further west though, and not in the direction we were heading. I would still mark it on the map and ask about it back in town. It would be best to deal with it before it started spawning monstrosities and twisting the local monsters into more dangerous creatures. Other than that, everything looked clear. I was able to head back and say as much to Ravan and eat a delicious lunch prepared by Charl. The innkeeper back in Evergold took me aside to ask if you ate meat, you know. Charl chuckled as he ate his stew. If we had a copper for every time we were asked the question we wouldn't even need to work. It always surprises them when I say that I prefer meat over greens, I muse. Admittedly I preferred fresh fruit to either of those though. I have no ideas how these rumors spread so much, although at least he didn't think I ate human children raw or something. After lunch, we continued on our way while killing all the monsters in our way. It wasn't until we had descended down into one of the valleys and were following the path up the other side when my danger sense twigged and I threw myself to the side just in time to avoid a bolt of lightning striking the ground where I had just stood. Monster in the sky. Rovan called out as I scrambled back to my feet and knocked an arrow, squinting against the glare of the sun while I tried to see the threat. It didn't take long to see. I have no idea how we missed a massive eagle-like bird that seemed to be partially made of lightning, but none of us had noticed it until it had struck. I had an arrow flying and another knocked in a second. Meanwhile I heard Ilma shout, "It is a thunderbird." But I thought they only lived in the far south. My arrow struck the monster in its shoulder. It looked like barely a pinprick, but I was actually glad that my arrow was able to penetrate the monster's feathers and skin at all. This battle was all up to Ilma and I, and this was proof that our fight wasn't hopeless. But my danger sense started to scream again and Ilma started shouting for everyone to run as all of the frontliners scrambled for cover. The Thunderbird responded to my arrow with a blast of lightning like nothing I had seen before. I was half blinded, but I could feel the ground shaking. The path had been buried by rubble. Shit, we need to run. I shout to everyone. We can't fight this thing, but if we can get to cover. The only way to go was along the bottom of the valley. Going back the way we came would leave us too exposed. Rovan cursed, hauling tumbling to his feet, and started running. Meanwhile, when I thought the monster was going for another bolt I sent another arrow into it and the lightning dissipated. I could make it flinch. Our fighting retreat down the valley eventually led us to despair. The valley opened up into the plains. If we went there we would be hunted down with ease, There was only one option left. Rovan. I called to him as I shot another arrow at our pursuer. We need to split up, I'll lure it away. No. You can't risk your life like that. The Thunderbird had dodged my arrow and another bolt descended from the heavens like the fist of an angry god. It didn't hit us, but it did collapse another part of the valley. We would have to go out on the plains and worse. Shit, the damn thing is intelligent. Carlin growled and I cursed in my head as we were forced to run out of the valley. And now we get picked off, one by one. I thought to myself, seeing the Thunderbird swoop down and get grabbed by a giant tentacle. The hell is that? Tamling shrieked as the Thunderbird fought against the giant tentacles wrapping around it. No time to ask questions, one of those tentacles is coming for us. Emily yelled, throwing a fireball at a tentacle snaking towards the party. Don't let it grab you. The tentacle came close to Tamling, who struck out with a spear only to be thrown back in a shower of sparks. Fuck, the lightning is being conducted through the thing. Earl shouted as he rushed to the fallen Tamling. Imla, can't you do something about this? Warding against lightning is difficult. I could if I had time, but it would take a while. The Thunderbird had managed to fight its way free and was now screeching at. Well, it looked like a turtle with octopus tentacles coming out of its mouth. Never mind, the bird is running. Grab Tamling and get out before that thing sends those tentacles after us. Rovan ordered, but the tentacles were fast and didn't seem to care about my arrows at all, no matter how many I hit them with. Tamling seemed to be unconscious and there was no way they could drag him away in time. The tentacles were already closing in and about to strike. They were knocked away by a blast of compressed air. Yet another monster had joined the battle. That is a gale wyvern, I shouted, recognizing the species as one that lived in the upper boughs of some of the great oaks that also contained elden groves. What is it doing here? Was it protecting Tamling? That was crazy, but the wyvern had even landed. Who had ever heard of a gale wyvern landing in the middle of a battle? The fact that it was fighting against whatever the hell that was instead of trying to grab one of us was a good sign in my opinion. Come on, back into the valley. I shouted, sending another arrow into a tentacle as the others ran back into the valley before following them myself after I saw the wyvern take off and get away from the other monster. Earl, how is Tamling? Rovan asked as soon as he could catch his breath. Tamling did not look good. He had taken a massive shock and was still smoking. Bad. Earl said tersely, his hands glowing with power. Too bad for me to handle. Yakus is powerful but I am not. He needs to make it to the healers in Evergolden fast. I saw Rovan glance at the collapsed rubble. Now that we weren't being chased by a murderous Thunderbird, we could climb it, but there was no way we would be able to get Tamling to Evergold quickly. I heard a small sound and immediately whipped my head around, fearing the worst only to see a curious sight. The gale wyvern was sitting on a nearby boulder, watching us intently. Suddenly, I had a wild idea. Wyverns were smart although they weren't really sentient, but it would have known what it was doing when it helped us. The others had turned a little after I had, prepping their weapons with hard looks on their faces. I, however, set my bow down and slowly walked forward with my hands up to show my empty palms. Hey there, I tried to say calmly, praying to whichever god that would listen that I was able to get the idea across. Can you help us? The wyvern cocked its head, looking at me intently as I approached. Ray, I know you want to be a tamer but now is not the time, Rovan said quietly, warily. And wyverns are dragonoids, they are basically untamable by anyone but an expert anyway. Will you help us? I asked again. Please? The wyvern responded by rolling over, which was not quite the response I had hoped for, but it wasn't a dangerous one. I have no idea what proper wyvern behavior was, but there was no way that it was anything but an invitation to come closer and I did. I inched forward until I was able to touch it, feeling its scales and feathers beneath my hand. Getting up to get back on its feet and allow me to climb on its back took all the courage I could muster, but it let me do it. It even let me guide it. Earl, you know what I am thinking, I said, as I looked down at Tamling. Would it work? The risk, Rovan began, but was immediately interrupted. It is our only chance, Chow Earl replied grimly. "Take him to Evergold, we will make it back as soon as we can." The wyvern allowed us to get tumbling onto its back, where I held him as we took off. The ground that it had taken us hours to traverse melted away as we sped through the air, and soon Evergold was in sight. Alarms were sounded almost immediately, so I had the wyvern set down in front of the gate. To do otherwise would risk us all being shot down. "Guards!" I shout from the back of the wyvern, "we need help, we have an injured man here." To their credit, the guards quickly managed to understand that the wyvern was under my control. Kind of. Technically it wasn't, but I had no intention of telling them, at least at first, but after Tamling was rushed away to the healers. "You have met the requirements for the class, Tamer. You have 4 open class slots. You have classes available, would you like to see them now?" I quickly chose Tamer and gained a new ability, Wild Pact, which I immediately used. I felt the bond, the link, reach out to the wyvern and the wyvern accepted. "You have met the requirements for the advanced class, Ranger. You have met the requirements for the advanced class, Wyvern Rider. You have 3 open class slots. You have classes available, would you like to see them now?" Note, Ranger is a consolidated class. Classes combined into Ranger will have their slots opened again. I immediately chose both, uncaring about the classes that were combined into Ranger. With a chance like this coming by, I was sure it was something I would never regret. Chapter 37 Cadence Lees as a yet nameless Gale Wyvern Puff. I had no clue what anyone around me was saying, but it did look like I wasn't about to be attacked. Sure, I wasn't particularly careful with my life, although I blame a lot of that on my monster instincts, but I would rather not die so long as not dying was an option. I would risk my life for another, but that was just good economics, wasn't it? They had one life. I had many lives. Ergo, their life is worth more than mine. Yeah, no. Calling my life worthless in comparison to others' lives seems kind of wrong? I can't really articulate why right now, because I also feel it is right too. It was too much to think about right now. Which might be a good thing, because this was hardly the time for philosophy. A mix of monster instincts and human impulses had dropped me into the middle of a bit of a mess. I had no idea this town was even here before today, and now I was in the middle of it being watched by a few men dressed in light armor and carrying bows, guards, I presumed because their armor was all the same like a uniform. The town was situated north of a large hill that had hid it from my view, but it is still shocking to see just how much I had missed while I was flying. That was probably a good thing, because I really had not noticed just how lonely I had been and I would have tried to interact with a town and gotten shot for my trouble. Now I was here and not shot, so everything worked out for the best. I may have also entered into a magical contract I don't know anything about to an elf that I also know nothing about and can't understand. In my defense, it didn't feel like it was designed to take control of my mind or even control me. No, I had gotten a feeling of communication, which is incredibly odd, because I don't even know what a feeling of communication is, and I had accepted it without thinking about it much. Now I was linked to this elf girl and could somewhat sense her feelings and desires in a corner of my mind. I am pretty sure she had the same from me. If the worst happened, the link did not feel particularly strong. I am pretty sure I could break it just by deciding to do so. But why would I do that? My entire goal for this life was to do better than my previous ones, to try and gain points, and I think I would be more effective working with someone. Not that I had been giving much consideration to that goal this past year, but after fighting the Blood Moly and evolving into a young Gale Wyvern I felt I had a bit more wiggle room to worry about that goal instead of just worrying about survival. The little elf girl caught my attention, asking me to follow her. It actually was a somewhat fascinating experience. I could not understand her words, but she made expressive gestures and our link gave me a glimpse of her feelings and desires. She felt nervous and scared, but mostly hopeful with a pinch of determination. I could tell she wanted me to be near her, but she was moving away. I obliged her. following her through the streets while internally debating exactly how I should behave. I didn't have to let them know how intelligent I was, although the cat might be out of the bag with that. Still, it was somewhat tempting to pretend to just be a relatively intelligent creature. Although that was probably a really stupid idea. I noticed that the guards were shadowing us as we walked, and my wyvern instincts really hated that. It felt like being stalked by a predator, but it wasn't so hard to ignore when I focused on the feelings Ray sent over our link. Hey, could you have the guards back off a bit more? They are really making her nervous. Ray said something and the guards made a face and backed off a couple of feet more. It wasn't much, but it was something. And it was nice to have some confirmation that she could feel my emotions and desires like I could hers. The building we stopped in front of was 3 stories tall and had a bunch of interesting-looking people in front of it as well as peering out from the windows. They weren't soldiers or guards, but they had weapons and armor, often mismatched, and some definitely seemed to be magic users. All of them were staring at me, but I had gotten over that being an issue in my last life. A gruff, well-dressed man stepped outside, along with a terrified-looking young woman. I imagine that the man is in charge of whatever this is and the young woman was probably some kind of secretary or administrative assistant. She probably hadn't expected to meet a monster today and I certainly could bite her head off, but weren't humans supposed to taste bad? I feel like I had read a clickbait article back on Earth to that effect, but I have no idea how accurate it was. I suppose I could test the taste of a criminal. There has to be bandits around somewhere, right? But bandits don't exactly have a reputation for bathing, so eating them would be disgusting. More importantly, why don't I feel worse about the thought of eating people? A runner came by and told me of the situation. Was hoping for a quiet day. Is there even a point to this? It is following the gal. I don't see how doing a status check will make it less likely to flip out. The older man sounded a bit like an asshole, whatever he was saying. The poor assistant next to him looked about to faint and he didn't seem to care at all. She is very smart, the little elf was praising me. I think I would ask for a status check regardless of what the guard wishes, just to be sure. Well, let's get this over with. He just pushed his assistant forward, rude. Maybe I should try eating him first. Poor girl, don't worry, I won't eat you. I might not have the same instinctive revulsion I am used to, but I do still have morals. Anyway, I am curious what this is all about. Is it a test of some kind? Eventually, the terrified girl was coerced into coming close to me and laying her hand on one of my wings. She held a stone in her other hand and after a second a magical picture was projected from it. I recognized it even though it was in a different language than I was used to. That was my status. Name. Species, Young Gale Wyvern Level, 0/10 Experience, 000/260. Class, Hunter. Class Level, 26 Health, 415 Mana, 48 Stamina, 4200th. Statistics, STR, 136 End, 157 Vit, 129 Agi, 182 Dex, 121 Per, 153 AC, 103 Will, 108 Cha, 99 MGC, 96 Lock, 163 Abilities. Presence. Class, Hunter's Rest. Class, Breathes Through Her Skin. Racial, Poison Spice. Class, Blood Trail. Class, Endless Hunt. Racial, Toxic Skin. Racial, Toxin Control. Minor. Racial, Regeneration. Minor. Lesser. Racial, Scale Armor. Minor. Racial, Envenomed Bite. Hatchling Comatose Lizard. Racial, Infravision. Racial, Saludivore. Racial, Strong Stomach. Racial, Aerokinesis. Racial, Gale Wyvern Hide. Racial, Lesser Wyvern Hide. Racial, Poison Resistance. Major. Racial, Disease Resistance. Minor. Racial, Better First Impression. Healthy Thoughts. First Words. Killing Blow. Skills, Air Magic. 1 Ambush. 4 Analysis. 3 Cartography. 1 Charge. 5 Cleaning. 3 Climbing. 3 Composing. 1 Construction. 3 Cooking. 4 Charm. 1 Crafting. 5 Dancing. 2 Dagger. 1 digging, 6 dodge, 4 drawing, 1 etiquette, 1 flight, 3 intimidate, 2 jumping, 4 leatherworking, 2 manipulation, 2 menaçance, 3 meditation, 6 poetry, 1 pottery, 2 reading, 1 singing, 2 spear, 3 sprinting, 4 swimming, 4 stealth, 6 taunt, 1 throwing, 4 tracking, 4 trap making, 7 weaving, 2 riding, 3. I had evolved after the blood moly, and wasn't that a slog of a fight? For all my apprehension about jumping down to fight it, it turns out that there was a good reason for it to inhabit corpses like it did. It had basically no way to hurt me. Of course, the damn thing also refused to die for hours of me struggling to cut it up with my claws, so I can see why the lynx had avoided it. If I didn't have my human mind, I doubt my monster instincts would have wanted to engage in what, from start to finish, was a 10-hour fight. Anyway, the most interesting and powerful evolution I had seen was the young Gale Wyvern. Young Gale Wyvern, very rare. Wyverns are known for adapting dramatically to mana on their environment. The Gale Wyvern is an example of a wyvern that lives at high altitudes and has adapted to be one of the most dangerous predators in the sky. Although lacking the powerful offensive capability of blazing wyverns or the defensive hide of a stone wyvern, their aerokinesis racial ability allows them to move through the air in ways that seem impossible. Plus 60 Agi, plus 40 to all other stats, plus 6 STR, and VIT, per, MGC, and Agi per level, plus 5 Dex and Will per level, plus 4 to AC and Chow per level, aerokinesis racial. Gale Wyvern hide racial. Note, Draconoid evolutions have extra level and experience requirements. Unlocked by being a hatchling wyvern, having the skill air magic. Look. It is a class. Apparently my status was interesting to the crowd. It was pretty impressive compared to what it was, but I suspected that most people who could fight could crush me easily. Is it a human then? Nah, look at it. 1 class, no open class slots. Probably was a monster that stumbled on human evolution and then evolved back into a monster. 1 class slot means it happened in the first stage evolutions and not later. The old man just snorted and shook his head before drawing a pipe out. I, as a moral and upstanding individual, tried to blow the pipe out of his hands with air magic because smoking kills. Unfortunately, his grip was too strong. He just snorted again and lit the pipe with a flick of his finger. Everyone else freaked out, and suddenly there were a lot of weapons being pointed at me. Calm your tits, you wimps. You saw its stats, I could kill it by petting it too hard. And you weaklings who call yourselves adventurers outnumber it 100 to 1. Thankfully, my stupidity doesn't seem to have gotten me killed. I could feel the worry pounding through the body right now. I need to take this more seriously. Admittedly, it is hard to pay attention when I have no idea what they are saying. So? How intelligent is she? The little elf asked a question anxiously, but the emotions were a bit too complex for me to catch in their entirety. Hard to say. Can't tell what my human it evolved into, but since it only has a single class slot it probably is about as smart as a 5-year-old child at most. Wyverns aren't dumb either. So it could possibly be pretty smart in some areas when it gets older. Then, I can keep her? Oh, now that is a lot of hope coming over the bond. That is probably a good thing for me. Yeah, but you could have anyways. Everyone around here is acting like they've never seen a god's damned tamer before. Few tamers can handle a wyvern. It was best to be sure. Ooh, a guard in a fancy outfit. Their captain, presumably. He doesn't seem agitated, so I am pretty sure I am home free now. The crowd seems to be dispersing, and the secretary had fled back inside the building, so it seemed the show was over. Fancy Pants' guard was sending the other guards away, so it was just me and the little elf left. Ray, she made a sound and then pointed at herself. Her name. I tried it out but my current body wasn't made for speech, so it came out as, Raw. My name is Ray. Name. Ray. She said with a bit of a giggle. I could feel her through the bond. The sudden relief of her stress from fighting, helping to rescue her teammate, and then dealing with me had left her in a kind of guilty high, and apparently my attempt at her name had amused her greatly. You. Name. Is. Curiosity now, over the bond. The desire to know about me. She was asking my name. But I don't have a name in this life yet. I can't even name myself, which was frustrating in the extreme. I pushed my feelings to her and I think she understood. Then I will call you Huka, how does that sound? Ray Marsalili is attempting to name you Huka. Do you accept this name? Sure, why not? It was sure a lot less to say than Ray Marsalili. I can easily see why she said to call her Ray. You have accepted a name from Ray Marsalili. You are now Huka. Cadence's new team. Note, there are many possible ways to unlock every class. The unlock requirements that are shown are the ones that the character unlocked them with. Name, Ray Marsalili. Species, Elf. Classes, Ranger LVL. 25, Wyvern Rider LVL. 0. Open class slots, 6. Health, 890th mana, 82/82 stamina, 100th. Statistics, STR, 240 end, 190 vit, 351 agi, 290 dex, 220 per, 280 AC, 185 will, 175 cha, 185 mgc, 165 lock, 122 abilities. Presence class, Hunter's Rest class, Thrill of the Hunt class, Forest Cloak class, Eagle Eye class, Awareness class, True Shot class, Elven Archery class, Long Shot class, Fortitude class, Power Strike class, Herb Sense class, Herbal Remedy class, Deadly Poison class, Wild Pact class, Long Stride class, Dragonheart's Ember class. Skills, Air Magic, 2 Alchemy, 13 Ambush, 25 Archery, 53 Cartography, 18 Charge, 10 Cleaning, 16 Climbing, 24 Composing, 11 Cooking, 12 Charm, 7 Crafting, 11 Dancing, 18 Dagger, 21 Digging, 2 Dodge, 22 Drawing, 7 Earth Magic, 1 Etiquette, 20 Gardening, 22 Interrogation, 5 Intimidate, 2 Jumping, 22 Leadership, 2 Leatherworking, 1 Mana Manipulation, 5 Menacence, 18 Meditation, 22 Mercantilism, 2 Painting, 5 Poetry, 15 Pottery, 2 Reading, 20 Writing, 2 Child, 5 Singing, 23 Spear, 13 Sprinting, 27 Swimming, 14 Sword, 16 Stealth, 34 Taunt, 5 Teamwork, 13 Throwing, 12 Tracking, 30 Trap Making, 26 Unarmed Combat, 3 Water Magic, 1 Weaving, 2 Riding, 21 Name, Rovan Cassiat. Species, Human. Classes, Heavy Infantry LVL. 20, Officer LVL. 11, Vanguard LVL. 16, Merchant LVL. 3. Open class slots, 6. Health, 966 mana, 81/81 stamina, 100th. Statistics, STR, 372 end, 382 vit, 297 agi, 225 dex, 198 per, 210 AC, 217 will, 258 cha, 238 mgc, 162 lock, 96 abilities. Fortitude class, Long March class, Armor Instinct class, Stamina Recovery, Major class, Armor of the Victor class, Voice of Command class, Forward class, Weighted Charge class, Stunning Impact class, Lead the Charge class, Value Sense class. Skills, Ambush, 10 Archery, 11 Cartography, 7 Charge, 21 Cleaning, 12 Climbing, 9 Composing, 1 Cooking, 9 Charm, 14 crafting, 16 dancing, 1 dagger, 25 digging, 15 dodge, 11 drawing, 2 etiquette, 29 interrogation, 15 intimidate, 20 jumping, 8 leadership, 22 leatherworking, 1 meditation, 2 mercantilism, 25 poetry, 2 pottery, 2 reading, 22 child, 35 singing, 10 spear, 27 sprinting, 20 swimming, 11 sword, 22 stealth, 11 taunt, 30 teamwork, 40 throwing, 19 tracking, 22 trap making, 1 unarmed combat, 9 riding, 18 Name, Ilma Devon Jashui species, human. Classes, witch LVL. 19, firemage LVL. 21, noble LVL. 3, commoner LVL. 6. Open class slots, 5. Health, 793 793 mana, 258 stamina, 100th. Statistics, STR, 181 and 191 vit, 201 Achi, 219 dex, 238 per, 268 AC, 337 will, 311 cha, 244 mgc, 517 lock, 67 abilities. Witch's Eye class, Reap What You Sow class, Wicked Curse class, Monoguard class, Fire Resistance, Major class, Ignition class, Manaburn class, Everything Burns class, Noble Bearing class, Hunger Resistance, Moderate class. Skills, Air Magic, 11 Alchemy, 24 Ambush, 11 Cleaning, 7 Climbing, 6 Composing, 9 Cooking, 3 Charm, 2 crafting, 2 dancing, 15 dagger, 1 divination, 11 dodge, 2 drawing, 17 earth magic, 17 enchanting, 12 etiquette, 25 fire magic, 24 gardening, 15 interrogation, 1 intimidate, 8 jumping, 3 mana manipulation, 21 manascence, 40 meditation, 32 mercantilism, 1 painting, 15 poetry, 8 reading, 29 ritual magic, 9 child, 1 singing, 16 sprinting, 9 summoning, 5 swimming, 18 sword, 1 stealth, 3 stealing, 11 taunt, 5 teamwork, 11 throwing, 3 tracking, 1 trap making, 12 water magic, 13 riding, 28 Name, Chauralkan species, human. Classes, Acolyte LVL. 16, Brawler LVL. 15, Chef LVL. 20. Open class slots, 7. Health, 782 782nd mana, 86 stamina, 100th. Statistics, STR, 272 and 334 vit, 224 Achi, 180 dex, 203 per, 178 AC, 168 will, 280 cha, 178 mgc, 172 lock, 111 abilities. Prayer class, Ambition is Life class, Journey to the Peak class, Pride in Accomplishment class, Drunken Fury class, Pretty Face class, Brutal Knuckles class, Food Sense class, Unusual Ingredients class, Campfire Cooking class, Monster Cooking class. Skills, Air Magic, 1 Alchemy, 21 Ambush, 4 Archery, 1 Cartography, 5 Channeling, 29 Charge, 13 Cleaning, 11 Construction, 1 Climbing, 5 Cooking, 32 Charm, 11 Crafting, 7 Dancing, 9 Dagger, 1 Digging, 1 Dodge, 32 Drawing, 1 Earth Magic, 1 Etiquette, 31 Fire Magic, 1 First Aid, 20 Gardening, 3 Interrogation, 15 Intimidate, 12 Jumping, 15 Leadership, 3 Leatherworking, 1 Mana Manipulation, 1 Manascence, 3 Meditation, 22 mercantilism, 6. Painting, 1 poetry, 11 pottery, 1 reading, 30 writing, 7 ritual magic, 22 child, 1 singing, 17 spear, 1 sprinting, 32 swimming, 1 sword, 1 stealth, 5 taunt, 12 throwing, 3 tracking, 1 trap making, 1 unarmed combat, 29 water magic, 1 weaving, 1 writing, 30 Name, Carlin species, human. Classes, rogue LVL. 27, swordsman LVL. 17, skirmisher LVL. 18, gambler LVL. 9. Open class slots, 6. Health, 859 859th mana, 121 121st stamina, 100th. Statistics, SDR, 326 and 275 Vit, 292 Agi, 419 Dex, 436 per, 323 AC, 281 Will, 242 Cha, 335 MGC, 242 Lock, 299 Abilities: Fortitude class, Fast Hands class, In the Shadows class, Knife in the Back class, Shady Dealings class, Underhanded Combat class, Shadow Stalk class, Sword Handling class, Swift Strikes class, Power Strike class, Fast Turns class, Perfect Throw class, Bleeding Edge class, Roll the Dice class, Ace Up Your Sleeve class. Skills: Alchemy, 9 Ambush, 32 Archery, 11 Assassination, 2 Cartography, 2 Charge, 19 Cleaning, 1 Climbing, 25 Cooking, 3 Charm, 9 Crafting, 18 Dagger, 45 Digging, 5 Dodge, 30 Etiquette, 2 Interrogation, 15 Intimidate, 21 Jumping, 16 Lockpicking, 22 Mercantilism, 16 Reading, 7 Child, 5 Singing, 23 Spear, 21 Sprinting, 34 Swimming, 3 Sword, 41 Stealing, 32 Stealth, 57 Taunt, 30 Throwing, 40 Tracking, 21 Trap Making, 15 Unarmed Combat, 15 Riding, 6 Name, Tamling Mer species, human. Classes, Spearman LVL. 14, Warrior LVL. 9, Farmer LVL. 16, Commoner LVL. 11. Open class slots, 6. Health, 812 812th mana, 65 65th stamina, 100th. Statistics, SDR, 272 End, 270 Vit, 271 Agi, 153 Dex, 137 per, 134 AC, 115 Will, 191 Cha, 133 MGC, 130 Lock, 91 Abilities: Fortitude class, Power Strike class, Better Balance class, Piercing Thrust class, Bar Spear class, Lunge class, Breaking Dirt class, Fast Sprouts class, Weed Prevention class, Disease Resistance, Minor class, Pain Resistance, Minor class, Hunger Resistance, Minor class. Skills: Ambush, 3 Charge, 7 Cleaning, 5 Climbing, 6 Cooking, 6 Crafting, 20 Dagger, 1 Digging, 21 Dodge, 12 Etiquette, 5 Farming, 21 Gardening, 14 Jumping, 12 Meditation, 2 Mercantilism, 1 Reading, 4 Singing, 5 Spear, 20 Sprinting, 27 Swimming, 2 Sword, 3 Stealth, 34 Taunt, 1 Throwing, 1 Weaving, 2 Riding, 1 Ranger. Uncommon. Mankind likes to think of itself as the ruler of the world, and it is easy to do so inside their cities and ensconced in civilization. But step outside those walls and you enter a different world, a world that the Ranger is perfectly at home at. Moving quickly and quietly through the wilderness and using knowledge, understanding, and guile to avoid and discourage monsters. The ranger can be as safe inside a cave with a grumpy bear as another might be in their bedroom. But wear their bow if you should draw their ire. +6 STR, AG, and per level, +4 Dex, and Vit per level, +3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by acquiring 5 classes that can evolve into Ranger. Wyvern Rider. Rare riders are everywhere, and every one of them has dreamed of riding something more dangerous than a horse. Some gathered their courage and mounted regular monsters, but you had to go a step beyond. Wyvern riders have partnered with one of the most dangerous monsters in the sky. The cousins of dragons that still retain a shard of that power. +6 to all stats per level. Unlocked by riding a wyvern and surviving. Archer. Common. A girl with a stick that throws other sticks far away. +3 STR, AG, and per level, +2 STR and per level, +1 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by being trained in elven archery. Herbalist. Uncommon. The herbalist is both healer and killer in one. Although looked down upon compared to alchemists, they can still cure ills and poison weapons with what nature has given them. The best friends to have tea with, but the worst enemies to get a toast from. +6 per AC, and Dex per level, +4 MGC and Vit per level, +3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by learning to identify over 50 herbs. Tamer. Uncommon. The tamer does not fight monsters, but instead makes monsters fight monsters. Capable of controlling and raising monsters, tamers are only as powerful as the companion they bring to the battle. +6 Cha, Will, and AC per level, +4 MGC and SDR per level, +3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by convincing a wyvern to help you. Heavy infantry. Uncommon. With heavy armor and heavy weapons, heavy infantry make an impact on the battlefield as they grind their opponents to dust. Although their agility is low, their strength and endurance are nothing to scoff at. They can take a hit and deal one out twice as bad. +6 SDR and per level, +4 Vit and Will per level, +2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by being an infantry class, wearing heavy armor in at least 2 battles, engaging in active combat in at least 5 battles. Officer. Uncommon. An army without a leader is just a mob, but even the most capable general would be helpless without the officers beneath him. Officers are leaders on the battlefield, keeping up the morale of the men while directing them to victory. A good officer can turn conscripts in warriors capable of withstanding any storm. +6 Cha and Will per level, +3 SDR, and AC, and per level, +2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by having the skill, leadership, being promoted by a superior officer, leading soldiers in battle successfully. Vanguard. Uncommon. First into the fray, always leading the charge. The vanguard exists to break the enemy's lines and draw first blood. With their superior strength, endurance, and vitality they force their opponents to deal with them because they simply do not go down easily. +6 SDR, and Vit per level, +4 AG per level, +2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by volunteering for the vanguard of an army, serving as the vanguard for an army, surviving battle. Merchant. Common. Gold is the blood of society, and merchants are the hearts that pump it through the world. Buying, selling, trading, the merchant is always looking for a better deal and the next big thing. +3 per AC, and Cha per level, +2 Will per level, +1 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by buying and selling multiple tons of goods. Witch. Rare witches are some of the most disliked magic users among the populace. While there is nothing inherently evil about a witch's power, the association is so deep that many witches are forced into using darker sorcery just to survive. Their powers are subtle, but can be terrifyingly powerful. +10 MGC per level, +6 Will and AC per level, +3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by having the skill, alchemy above level 20, having the skill, mana manipulation above level 20, having the skill, Menacense above level 30, having used magic to curse a person in revenge, having used magic to bless a person in secret. Firemage, uncommon. The Firemage is one of the most sought-after magic users in the world. Their sheer utility in monster suppression is nearly unmatched, and their talents can earn them top coin anywhere in the world. Plus 8 MGC per level, plus 4 will, AC, per, and dex per level, plus 2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by lighting a person on fire. Noble, uncommon. Whether by blood or merit, you are elevated above the lesser masses. The Noble guides and leads their lessers and reaps the rewards of their efforts. Plus 6 Chine will per level, plus 3 AC, per, MGC, and AG per level, plus 2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by being granted a Noble title. Acolyte, uncommon. You have devoted your life to the gods themselves. Take care you do not disappoint. Plus 10 will per level, plus 3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by dedicating yourself to a religious order and being provisionally accepted. Brawler, common. You have taken a few punches to the face and thrown a few yourself. You don't need fancy weapons to take on your opponents, instead you'd rather just smash a tankard over their head and slug them in the gut. Plus 5 STR, and, VIT, and AG per level. Unlocked by engaging in over 10 tavern brawls. Chef, common. Everyone loves food, and you know how to make it. A chef makes better food faster, and gets all the kisses as a result. Plus 3 per, dex, and VIT per level, plus 2 STRM and per level, plus 1 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by loving food too much. Rogue, uncommon. Rogues are a strange breed. Most of those familiar with the dark and seedy side of society tend towards being thieves or cutthroats, and in truth, a fair number of rogues are those too. However, some rogues have a sense of honor and ethics. For all they act in the darkness, they are not on the side of darkness itself. They are on no one's side but their own. Plus 6 AG and dex per level, plus 4 SDRM chow per level, plus 2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by giving up your thief class but still interacting with the underground of society. Swordsman, common. The swordsman is a man with a sword. Obviously. Plus 4 STR, AG, and dex per level, plus 3 and VIT per level, plus 2 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by training with a sword for 3 months. Skirmisher, uncommon. Skirmishers are the masters of the hit and run. Constantly on the edge of the fight, always waiting for an opening to drive their blade home. They put their enemies off balance through superior positioning and ambush tactics, winning battles through finesse instead of strength. Plus 6 AG and dex per level, plus 5 per level, plus 4 SC per level, plus 3 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by attacking an opponent, running away, attacking them again, running away again, then attacking and killing them all within half an hour. Gambler, rare. Let a roll of chances dice alter the board. Plus 4 per, cha, and a C per level, chance to gain or lose a point of luck per level. Unlocked by gambling away 1,000 gold total. Spearman, common. A man with a pointy stick that keeps others at a distance. Plus 3 STR, and VIT per level, plus 2 will and AG per level, plus 1 to all other stats per level. Unlocked by being trained in the use of a spear by an officer. Farmer, common. Farmers are the backbone of the world. Without their efforts cities would starve and civilization would collapse. Farmers have great strength, endurance and vitality for a common class and can pack more of a punch than most would expect. Plus 5 STR, and VIT per level, plus 2 will per level, plus 1 AG and dex per level. Unlocked by being raised on a farm. Chapter 38. Why are adventurer guildmasters so bad at politics? Isn't the answer obvious? A guildmaster has to keep adventurers in line, so the minimum requirements to become a guildmaster is to be able to put down a C-rank adventuring team by themselves and to be able to win a fight against most individual B-rank adventurers. which means that the minimum requirement for a guildmaster is to be an upper B-rank adventurer, which means that your average guildmaster is stronger than 90% of the entire world, which means that when you have a really big hammer, all of your problems start to look like nails. S-rank adventurer Dre the Massacre, talking to the King of Lamb. Ray Marsalilipov. Wait a second before you head off to meet your team. The guildmaster Ivano asked me to talk to him after the crowd dispersed, and anything that this man asks is basically a command from heaven. Worse even, because Ivano was far more likely to smite you than the gods were. Evergold was a gold mining town sitting on what might very well be the largest and richest gold vein in the entire world. That meant that a lot of people would want to steal that gold for themselves, but it also meant that Kalaro, the country Evergold was situated in, could easily afford to hire the best. Ivano was a man who had a class beyond very rare, the epic class, pyroclasmage. The smoke from his pipe hung above his head, occasionally throwing off sparks. Rumor had it that he could kill a person simply by breathing his pipe smoke out on their face. In all-out combat he was described as disastrous, or calamitous. The former S-rank adventurer, Ivano the Apocalypse. And for some reason, Hyuka was mildly annoyed at him. At least, I think it was annoyance. The wyvern clearly wanted him to go away and bother someone else, but she also more clearly had no clue that she was looking at a man who could have roasted that Thunderbird with a casual wave. Please don't try and knock his pipe away again, I whispered to Hyuka under my breath, trying to push calm through the bond. For a creature with an inspect-style skill, you would think you'd know not to poke this sleeping Drago bear. It's fine, Ivano waved his hand and the smoke formed a dome around us, turning the world outside opaque. As I said, the little gal can't actually hurt me. It'd be like getting mad at a kid for doing something dumb. They are kids, of course they are going to do something dumb. Thank you for that, sir, I felt some relief, but I was still a little bit wary. No, it was Hyuka who was wary. She didn't know that the smoke was a privacy screen and was nervous about it. I should get her out of here as soon as possible. How can I help you then? I had to do a pretty bit of magic to hide that gal's status, Ivano admitted, and I felt my eyes widen. He could interfere with a status check. My own fault for doing it in public like an idiot. I suppose it's true what they say, you learn something every day for your whole life and still die a fool. Or I will anyway, an elf like you will be around a bit longer. I swallowed, ignoring his tangents for the moment, and asked the obvious next question. Why did you hide it? What was in Hyuka's status? I needed to calm down. I could feel my anxiety flowing into Hyuka, and that just made her more wary, and then that wariness flowed back into me, making me more anxious. If I didn't get a grip soon I'd probably start to panic and Hyuka would try and attack a one-man disaster. Even now, she was crouching down slightly, bending her legs in preparation to pounce forward. She paused though when the smoke formed an image of her status again, but this time I noticed that it was longer. Cartography. Etiquette. Poetry? I was surprised to see those skills, and a couple others were on the list now. Yeah, she's smarter than she is letting on, Ivano chuckled. Doesn't speak common though and doesn't have the acting skill, though I bet she will get that soon. Wait, then is she? I can't imagine a human pretending to be a monster. Ivano sighed and then a ripple of magic struck Hyuka and myself. Calming magic, clearly, as all my worries just melted away. Hyuka calmed down too, with the bond between us becoming still. I just went and told everyone she was about as smart as a 5-year-old, yeah. He spoke as he puffed away on his pipe, the smoke from his mouth went to add to the privacy screen around us. A monster that becomes human retains their human intelligence when they evolve into a monster again, but there is a little-known extra bit of trivia here. If an intelligent monster evolves into a human, they keep their intelligence from before and have to deal with the instincts of whatever body they are in, but if they evolve again they take both their original intelligence and the human instincts with them into their new form. He took his pipe in his hand and gestured towards Hyuka saying, "That wyvern right there? Probably has 3 different sets of instincts wrestling around inside it, one of which is a draconoid that probably wants to eat us right now. I had been aware of that quirk of monster evolution, but I had never really thought about it. I had lived longer than most humans ever would, and even though my development was slower, I still had picked up a lot of knowledge over the years. The real question was, so what does this all mean? It means the wyvern is probably very intelligent, but can't use it beyond immediate tasks. A look of pity crossed his face as he looked at Hyuka. She probably isn't even entirely sure why she is here or why she does anything. I can't be sure how intelligent she is, but given the breadth of her skills, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a person's level of intelligence locked behind instincts that she cannot understand or control. Now a lot of people have different ideas on what deserves ethical treatment, and a lot of people don't think that monsters, even if they are intelligent, deserve to be treated like people. I am not one of them, so I am going to ask you something. Can you be this girl's friend? Because I don't think she is a beast to master, but a person in a difficult place. * 30 minutes later. After Ivano had stopped calming us, both Hyuka and myself had our emotions slam into us like we had been struck by a giant. Or I did anyway. Hyuka seemed oddly unbothered by the event, more curious than anything else, but my mind was thrown into utter chaos. While I had promised to look after Hyuka, too much had happened to me today for me to handle it. For now, we went to check on Tamling, who was at the main temple complex. I had to find a way to ask Hyuka to wait, but Ivano was right, she was smarter than she was letting on. But I also could tell exactly what he meant by calling her a child trapped in her own head. If I paid attention to our bond, I could see exactly how mercurial her emotions were. Her feelings and desires shifted from moment to moment. Anger to amusement to introspection to annoyance to boredom to curiosity to happiness to confusion. Hyuka could barely seem to keep her mind straight. Well, that wasn't entirely true. I could feel a constant will behind it all. She wanted to be here for some reason, but it took all of her will to keep herself on track. It was not a good idea to leave her by the temple entrance, but I didn't have a choice if I wanted to check on Tamling. I need to know if he would live or die, and frankly, I feared the worst. Although Chal Earl could heal and was decent with his alchemy, he was a far cry from a dedicated priestess or alchemist. He might not have been able to do enough to keep Tamling alive through the journey here. I tried to keep those worries to myself as I attempted to ask Hyuka to wait, but she didn't even need to be asked. Instead, she just plopped down near the temple entrance. I pushed gratitude through the bond and went inside the building. The main temple complex was much the same as it would be anywhere else, just a large hall with alcoves dedicated to various gods and goddesses. There were temples to individual deities, but only a larger city would have a temple to every one of them. Evergold has 2 other temples, one to Marina, the goddess of prosperity, and Hamel, the god of the underground. Neither of them were very useful for healing, but luckily the main temple complex held a few priests of Arlson, the god of life. An acolyte led me back through the temple to the infirmary where Tamling laid in bed, still unconscious. Yet, he was looking a lot better, to my relief, with a priest on one side of the bed and a healer on the other. He no longer looked like a charred mess, although he hadn't gotten his hair back. A separate healer pulled me aside saying, "Please don't disturb them while they are working. I know it is hard to be in the dark about someone you care for, but healing is no easy matter." "You are right." I nodded before saying, "I just had to see if Tamling was dead." "You should get used to it, little elf." A stern voice from behind me spoke, and the healer stiffened, before hastily fumbling out an excuse and scurrying away. I turned to see an older woman with severe features and short-cropped gray hair striding towards me. For all her apparent age, her back was straight, her steps steady and quick, and her eyes bright. Too bright. The telltale mark of a priestess of LA, the goddess of truth, were their piercingly bright eyes. Even had the older woman not been wearing the robes, her eyes would have been an instant giveaway as to whom she had pledged her service and soul. She stepped close to me and started inspecting me closely, her face completely neutral and yet still giving off a critical air of disapproval. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I stuttered, intensely uncomfortable under the scrutiny. It felt like she was peeling back my skin and spirit to study what lay underneath, and I knew that wasn't actually too far from what was actually happening. The many gods and goddesses granted their followers many different powers and abilities. Every class has an ability that you are guaranteed to obtain when you take the class. Hunters gained presence, warriors gained fortitude, and a mage gained mana guard. Acolytes would obtain an ability based on the deity they worshipped. For example, Chow Earl, as a worshipper of Yuccas, gained the ability Ambition is Life, which allowed him to shore up his other stats with his willpower. He could survive, for a time, with his health at 0, refusing to die while he had yet to accomplish his goals, or sprint and fight at 0 stamina, or lift more than his strength should allow. An acolyte of LA would also gain an incredibly powerful ability, Eyes of Truth. They could see lies and secrets, even abstract ones like self-delusions, half-truths, and obfuscation. Given enough time, they could even read the details of a person's secrets without them having to say a word. Nothing could be hidden from them. But while the gods grant incredible power, that power also comes with its downsides and restrictions. Chow Earl, should his ambition ever falter or his goal seem too petty to Yuccas, would find himself weaker than before as his skill sapped the very life from his body. If he lost his ambition, Chow Earl would almost certainly die. Ali, on the other hand, for all her incredible power, had been cursed by the god of secrets. She could see the truth, but never speak of it, save to her younger brother, Scully's, the god of justice. The restriction also applied to her acolytes and priestess, but that didn't make it any less awkward to talk to them. Who wanted to talk to someone who could ferret out every single thing you have wanted to hide? Of course, nothing made people more suspicious than someone running from a priestess of LA. After all, what did they need to hide that desperately? She continued to look at me without saying anything. It occurred to me that there was an obvious reason she was here. Ivano had asked me to keep a secret because adventurers tended to be very wary of intelligent monsters, and I suppose a secret that is held by a guildmaster and former S-rank adventurer that might have a life hang in the balance would probably qualify as large enough to attract the priestess. On the other hand, she might be able to help. It would go a long way to making people happy if Yucca could be declared safe by a priestess of LA. So I started to explain the situation and asked the priestess to come with me and see Yucca. Fortunately, Yucca had not wandered off while I was inside, she just seemed to be humming. I turned to introduce Yucca to the priestess and immediately knew something was wrong. The priestess had stopped dead, staring at Yucca. A few seconds later, she started shaking and blood started to leak out from her glowing eyes before collapsing. I slammed the door to the temple back open, calling for another priest or healer as utter confusion poured through the bond. Chapter 39 Priestess of P40. To serve LA was to see the truth in all things. Although I lack her sight and so it takes me time to pierce every barrier, eventually they always fall. To see the world with her blessing is to see the workings of existence, to look at a grain of sand and see the parts that make up the parts that make it up. To see its long history and the many paths of its future. Priestesses of LA were trained with a grain of sand inside the empty room at LA's main temple. To survive, you had to be able to ignore the infinite knowledge that poured from that single grain of sand because otherwise it would drive you mad. Once you made it that far without becoming a gibbering wreck, the high priestesses would begin to send you to find information. First, broad things like the age of the piece, but then more and more specific pieces of information. A priestess of LA must be able to pick out a single grain of sand's worth of information from the infinite amount of knowledge that lies within a grain of sand. I had passed that trial and now could see the workings of the world. I could see particles in motion, know their velocity and direction, and see how they all worked together to form the marvel of reality. In truth, for I cannot lie to myself, I understand almost nothing of what I see. It might be possible, but to try and peer into the minutiae of creation was to lose your mind. It was a tradition for servants of LA to attempt it just before they died. I knew better than to look too deeply, to try and understand the strange and small mechanics that inhabit every single mode of the universe. I knew better than to look too broadly, to try and understand the whole of creation itself as to try and go beyond the gods themselves. A mortal who could understand and imagine such a universe might as well be a god, able to create an entire reality in their own mind. What I did see I could never speak of, save to a servant of Scully's, and even then only in service to justice and justice. And I greatly appreciated that restriction, because I would never be able to explain what I saw when I looked at that wyvern, no, that incarnator. Cadence Lee. She stood out like a beacon, and the truth itself rippled from her touch. The many lives, the many worlds, that I saw were shocking enough, but what I saw running through them was terrifying. There are no words to describe the breadth of the truth, nor any human mind that can withstand it without couching it in metaphor. Her very existence was pierced by a megalith, one that not only dwarfed her meager years but my entire world. I looked deeper and saw the workings beneath, the infinite and depthless machinery of gears churning without rest. Turning, ever turning, grinding worlds to dust and gathering the dust of worlds to make them anew. Infinite suns going dark and lifeless, endless stars being ignited in the void. Time had no meaning, a world was born, lived, and died, and the gears merely reversed themselves, and the unending march of time was halted effortlessly and rolled back. The calculations ran, a variable was changed, and the world did not end again. I could not stop looking. I could not stop seeing how the truth I had seen my entire adult life was bent and broken by the gears of a machine, only to be remade anew, yet different, reality bending second on second. I could feel my part in the truth be fed to those gears. I could feel myself being shattered like glass and reforged, again and again and again every moment. There was so much, there was so much, there was too much, to mucccchhh, oh goddess help me. A pair of hands covered my eyes, and there was blissful nothingness. Some things are not meant to be seen, child, I heard the voice of Aleth, but I could not reply. And there are some things that must be hidden even from the other gods, for merely knowing draws attention from beyond. Now sleep, little one. Sleep and do not dream. I shall borrow your body and speak to the servant of my younger brother while your spirit recovers. Cadence Lees as Huga Puff. Well, now this is awkward. I'll admit, my first thought when I saw the priestess faint with blood leaking from her eyes was, oh, come on, I'm not that ugly. I mean, really, what else am I supposed to do here? Yes, the human part of me wanted to help her, but this really wasn't a situation that could be helped by adding a wyvern to it. The wyvern part of me was considering eating her, but given the woman's advanced age I didn't think she would taste all that good. Other than that, I was only wondering if this would jeopardize my safety here. I was now at the center of a crowd again, which I wasn't much of a fan of, and the guards looked halfway ready to try and kill me. I couldn't even speak in my own defense, although I could fight in my own defense. That would be an incredibly stupid move, even for me in this life, because I wasn't exactly a small target that could escape with ease. Besides, sitting here has given me time to think and plan. My recent evolution to a young Gale Wyvern had given me an extra 40 willpower and acuity, and the difference was incredibly obvious. My thought process was still shot. Halfway through a thought I might start wondering if the priestess had collapsed because Pody had turned me into an eldritch abomination and my very existence was anathema too. Yeah, my ability to reason really was shot. However, I felt like I was waking up from a long dream and I had put together a provisional plan. One that required me to interact with people for a while at least. But then this woman just had to come along and ruin it. Several people were crowding around her now, and I could see her sitting up, but she was very clearly avoiding looking in my direction. She was speaking to a priest who was wearing a blindfold, who went and talked to Ray, and Ray eventually came over and led me away from the temple. I honestly couldn't tell what her emotions were through the bond, they were too complicated. Relief, fear, anxiety, hope, sadness, and happiness were all mixed together, so I mostly just tuned it out. The bond was nice, but it was no replacement for language. That was step 1 of my plan, learn the language. Now, there wasn't any guarantee about my second step, but I had some hope that it would work out. Over the last year, whenever I had the ability to do so, I had considered what P40 awarded points for. So far, P40 seemed to award the most points, aside from achievements, for killing things and for introducing technologies. Well, that whole Pantheon business from my last life was worth a ton of points too, but I don't think I could reproduce that reliably. However, P40 also gave points for classes, levels, skills, and abilities. So I could probably gain a lot of points simply by leveling my skills in this life, and I think that the people around me could tell me about skills I didn't know about yet. You have learned the skill, acting. Acting is now level 1. The acting skill helps you pretend to be someone or something else. For every level of acting, your effective charisma is increased by 0.5% at all times. Additionally, all of your stats are increased by an effective 0.5% while acting. Like that one. Sweet. I also wanted to learn more about evolution, although I doubt they would be willing to tell me that kind of information. I would be very hesitant to tell the magic air shark how to become a better magic air shark, were I them. So I needed to earn their trust. It shouldn't be too difficult, I am actually a good person. Or wyvern, anyway. Step 3 was, murder the fuck out of all the monsters in the wilderness with the strength I gain from working with humans. I am sure that I have the tools to launch poison gas attacks, so I should just be able to fly over a forest and kill very nearly everything once I figure out how. Environmental ethics were so much easier in a world with monsters in it. My grand plan wasn't really all that grand. In my defense, thinking was still hard. I kept getting distracted and having to force my thoughts back on topic. It is an incredible pain in the ass. On the bright side, it does make the time fly by. We were already at our destination. I was fairly sure it was an inn, and Ray was talking to the innkeeper. I could see what looked like a stable just behind the building, and I was fairly certain that I would have to sleep there. Doors were kind of an issue for me right now, and I don't imagine wyvern-sized beds would be a common thing. Ray seemed upset, but resigned, after the conversation. My prediction was correct as she led me to the stable, but Ray seemed particularly unhappy about it. I'm not sure why. Where else could I realistically sleep? Besides, it was better than my little hut in the valley, and my last life had gotten me used to sleeping on hard surfaces. Although, my home in the valley, Boldome, didn't smell like horse manure, but aerokinesis solved that issue quickly. I expected the horses to freak out, but instead I felt the bond between myself and Ray stretch to include the horses briefly, and Ray projected calmness and friendship through the bond to the horses until they calmed down and then withdrew the bond. I wonder if the horses had to agree to it like I did. I somehow doubt it. Something for me to think of later, I suppose. I curled up in the hay, expecting Ray to head back to the inn, but she sat down and leaned against me. Well, I won't say no to the company, especially when she started to point to things and start to name them. Step 1 of the plan was already going well. Ray stayed with me the entire night, only leaving to grab a meal for both of us and a blanket for herself. Getting to eat real food after so long was wonderful. I could feel her amusement at my own excitement about the food, but there was no way I could help myself. Yes, as a kobold I was able to cook, but my maid training did not cover how to cook lizards over a campfire using a rock. I got a cooked breakfast too. Forget my plan, I'll swear myself to you as a pet for eggs with hot sauce. I haven't had hot sauce for nearly 40 years, and finally I've been able to eat it again. Ah, P40, I take back every bad thing I said about you for making me a toad. Bringing me into this world, even if it had to be as a toad, was fantastic. Curiously, by the time Ray's party made it back to the inn, I was already starting to understand the language a bit. I suppose that first words was usually activated when I was a human baby and had basically no acuity, and my much higher acuity now was making it easier to learn? Or perhaps the bond was helping me to understand what Ray was teaching me. It could be both. Everyone, aside from Ray, left to go to the temple, at least, That is what I think they were doing, but she stayed with me. They came back without the kid, so he was probably still healing. I was actually pretty impressed. The kid would have died in Rasharon or the Hentai Empire because of the weakness inherent in healing magic. They seemed much more advanced here. It seemed that they were going to wait for him to recover before they left again, so I got a lot more lessons on the language over the next few days. It was day 3 when I realized that my act had failed hard. They, the low B-ranked adventuring party, seeking the horizon, were perfectly aware that I was as intelligent as a person and had been pretty much the entire time. I would have been terribly embarrassed, but for once my instincts were quite helpful because wyverns were pretty much shameless. Instead, I focused on trying to use my aerokinesis and air magic to talk. It wasn't going well, even with Ilma helping me learn to better use magic. Still, I had gained a couple levels out of it, so that was good. It was 5 days in total before the kid, Tamling, returned. "Hyuga, thank you," he came straight to me and bowed. "You saved my life. I owe you my life." He bowed to Ray and repeated that to her. Don't think I don't notice that slight blush, kid. Probably the entire team did, because they all had very high stats. They never mentioned their exact numbers, but I had watched Rovan help a cart get unstuck from some mud. The man lifted the cart like he was Pody damned Gene Valian. Ilma and Rovan started teasing Tamling almost immediately, with Ilma leading the way. I couldn't quite understand it all, but I did see him go from a slight blush to bright red. Even if I don't always know the words, understanding tone and body language is easy enough. Rays are slightly different from the humans, but it wasn't different enough to make much of a difference. Carlin, who barely ever talked, threw in a dry comment of his own, and Ray started to blush as well, hiding her face by turning to me and inspecting my scales. The whole group was laughing and I had to say it was a nice atmosphere. I think I could stay here for a while. * 2 days later *. An equal part of all gains, plus repayment for costs incurred while working with the party. Rovan was reading the contract to me, with that priestess from before, Afia, in attendance to guarantee his truthfulness. She very conspicuously refused to look at me and couldn't, apparently, tell me why. In the event this contract is broken or cancelled during an officially issued adventure or guild quest by the contractee will forfeit all claim on their share of the issued reward except that which is otherwise required by. So it turned out lawyer was a class and Rovan had paid one to draw up a legally binding employment contract for the party. Officiated as it was by a priestess of Aleth, when I learned what they could do it became really obvious why Afia had fell over screaming earlier. Pody does seem like the kind of ass who would be very big on his own privacy rights. Despite not giving me any, it could be confirmed by a servant of Aleth and enforced by a servant of Skolas anywhere in the world. After much mumming and difficulty, I had managed to ask and apparently there wasn't a god or a goddess of law in this world. I found this interesting, because personally I didn't see how there could really be a god of justice without a deity for law. Apparently the law was completely in human hands though, which seemed a very poor choice but was more functional than I was used to due to the influence of Aleth and Skolas. I was asked if I understood the terms of the contract, which was a fair question given that it was written in fantasy legalese. The contract didn't have any real surprises in it, in my opinion. I didn't sign away any rights except claims on treasure. Treasure was to be divided equally after costs had been paid, but I couldn't actually use any treasure anyway. I wasn't even sure what I would spend the money I'd be paid on, but I am sure I could find something. So I agreed that I understood the contract and agreed to it. Priestess Afia signed on my behalf and I became the newest member of Seeking the Horizon. Chapter 40 The problem with Nwave, the country I was apparently located in, was that it was a very new country. This continent, Varskia, had only been discovered a couple centuries ago and powerful, high-level, but politically restricted sapients and humans had rushed to the continent to break free of old power structures and start their own kingdoms. It had, as anyone could obviously guess, been a bloodbath. It was also mostly irrelevant, except that these new kingdoms were only resisted by primitive, lesser human tribes and so expanded far faster into a far greater area than they could support. While this meant plenty of work for adventurers who fought the omnipresent monster population, it also meant that kingdoms like Nwave lacked any real infrastructure away from their capital city. Now I, being a flying creature, heard this and dismissed it. Why should I care if there is a road or not? How would things like way stations and forts help me? I expressed this opinion and was promptly lightly scolded by Ray, who was teaching me about cartography, for ignoring their usefulness as landmarks. I think I could take our current hunt for a troublesome goblin tribe as a practical example. While I had hoped to take part in a fight against Turtlezilla, officially known as an eldritch and snapping turtle, apparently Guildmaster Ivano had flown over and roasted it himself. It was really disappointing, but then again, the reason why he was in the town in the first place was to keep the bigger monsters away. Why send over an army of lower-rank adventurers and lose half of them to Turtlezilla when Ivano could just as effectively kill the thing by himself? Lower-rank adventurers' time was much better spent doing what we were doing now, hunting the lower-rank monsters that infest the area. I would have thought it would be hard to miss an entire tribe of goblins. I spoke through aerokinesis, allowing Ray to hear me over the sound of the air rushing past my wings as we flew above the forested hills. Well, aside from hobgoblins and redcaps, your average goblin is barely larger than a human child, Ray responded as she scanned the woods below. They don't build permanent structures, and whether or not they can even use fire is hit and miss. They don't leave much of a trace. Is there even a point to scouting from the air then? They could even be in a cave or something. Yes, but this way we can scout the area and get an idea of the lay of the land. I don't really like the idea of you scouting on the ground anyway. I could speak through a mix of air magic, aerokinesis, singing, and poetry, but my pronunciation still left a lot to be desired. The only person who could reliably understand me was Ray, because she had the advantage of our bond that gave her an idea of my feelings, desires, and intentions. So she also probably knew that a small part of why I didn't want her to scout on the ground was that I wanted to be useful on my first quest with seeking the horizon. I was a little worried I would be kicked to the curb if I didn't pull my weight, and my only real contribution to the party was my ability to fly. In a straight fight, even Tamling was stronger than I was. I mean, I would never take part in a straight fight. I would just poison him and fly away because there really wasn't anything he could do to stop that. It was an interesting example of how little stats actually mattered in certain situations. Even though my motivations were somewhat selfish, Ray didn't mind. She seemed to be amused by that actually, asking how flying, by itself, wouldn't be enough to add value worth having in the party. Ray had a point. I could provide the team a lot of maneuverability and do other things like resupply the team while they were in the field. But I felt that would essentially relegate me to a pack animal, and while I wouldn't have minded it when I was thinking that I would need to pretend and hide my intelligence, it would be a very different thing to be treated like that when they knew how intelligent I was. Tricking them is different than. There, Ray spoke suddenly, peering down at the hills below. I see them. I don't think they are a very large tribe. How do you want to do this? My heartbeat sped up, and I had to focus on the professional calm that came steadily through the bond. I'll have you drop me off over there and then shadow me from above, Ray said, pointing at a location I could land nearby. If something goes wrong while I am scouting, you can dive down and back me up. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. So I fly down and she jumps off, disappearing into the forest like a ghost. I can still feel her location through the bond, and take off again and raise my altitude, flying higher and higher into the air. It was a good thing that I could fly, because Ray was fast. Ugh, honestly I was envious. Why couldn't I have incarnated into an elf? I'd have earned so many points. Gaining vitality as they aged, what kind of bullshit cheat is that? Admittedly, elves were not exactly prolific. A single elf might be born every 5 or 6 decades in the entirety of the species, which was probably part of the reason I wasn't an elf. Hard to be born as something that isn't being born when I am incarnating, I suppose. I shook those thoughts out of my head and tried to focus on my job. Admittedly, there wasn't much to focus on. My eyesight was good compared to most everyone, but even though my new team was low B rank, they still were B rank. My vision was only slightly better than Tamling's. Ray and Carlin seemed to have telescopes for eyes in comparison. So where Ray saw signs of goblins, I saw trees, and really, once you've seen one tree you have pretty much seen them all. So my thoughts would wander away to think thoughts like, it is interesting how such a magnificent view can fail to move me when I see it all the time. After which, my mission anxiety would rise up and I would wrench my mind back on track. After spending some time with relatively normal people and now that I had over 100 willpower again, I was starting to realize that my mind is far more messed up than I had originally thought. I had more willpower than the average person without a system, and yet I couldn't even keep myself from thinking about things like that instead of focusing on my mission. A slight twinge through the bond pulled my attention to a small clearing and I flew down to pick Ray up. "Already done?" I asked, a bit surprised that her scouting hadn't taken longer. "Long stride really makes a difference," Ray responded, and although I couldn't see her smile while she was on my back I could feel it through the bond. "It is an incredible ability." "Eh? Wings are better," I reply. "Don't think I didn't notice your envy through the bond." She took the opportunity to tease me. "Just admit that you miss running." "Nope. Not happening. I am absolutely not unhappy about how I move when I am on the ground. I have a very intimidating and ferocious way of movement that makes me appear to be stalking prey even when I merely walk, and in no way do I look like a three-legged chicken being electrocuted when I try to run. Jokes aside, we will need to get back to Rovan." Her tone turned serious. "The tribe is a lot larger and better equipped than we thought." "Hobs? Worse, redcaps." Again, I couldn't see Ray's face but I could feel her grimace through the bond. "What are redcaps? A hobgoblin evolution?" "No. Well, I suppose technically. But redcaps evolved from gremlins. A second-tier evolved monster." Monster categorization was a difficult and contentious field of study. Merely studying monsters was difficult enough. Researchers either had to rely on corpses cut up and butchered by adventurers or venture into the wilderness themselves and quite possibly end up as a meal for the monster they wished to observe. Add to that the many monsters that were either partially or entirely made of synthetic or inorganic material and the ones made of various kinds of mana and the ones that are undead spirits, and more than a few people who dared enter the field have ended up throwing up their hands and quitting. However, there are a couple of agreed-upon classifications. There are the broad species classifications, like Dragonoid or Goblinoid. There are type classifications, like Elemental or Undead. And there is the origin classification, born, mutated, or evolved. A born monster is a monster that can breed and usually replenishes its numbers through reproduction. There is some overlap between born and mutated because of the fact that all mutated animals breed true, but a true born monster has no natural analog. Goblins are born monsters. The vast majority of goblins that exist were born naturally and an incredibly small minority of them evolved from other species. Gremlins, Ray explained, were in the last category, evolved monsters. Gremlins cannot breed and they only exist when the goblin evolves into them. This almost never happens, because it requires a goblin to have a higher magic stat and to learn some magic, without becoming a goblin shaman. Redcaps are also evolved monsters. They are called a second-tier evolved monster because they only evolved from gremlins, who are themselves an evolved monster. Is that important? It might be interesting trivia, but does a monster's specific classification matter much once you've established that you can actually kill it? Gremlins are basically magic goblins, Ray explained. Minor telekinesis, blink teleportation, slight magical camouflage, and some other tricks. They are more dangerous than goblins, but that isn't saying much. Your average gremlin can still be killed by basically anyone who has a pulse. Redcaps on the other hand. They are natural assassins, and often end up gaining the assassin class. Imagine if a slightly smaller man popped out of nowhere in front of you already swinging a hatchet towards your neck. That is a redcap. How would you even fight that? Short-range teleportation, called blinking, would be ridiculous to defend against. With how Ray described it, an experienced user could probably start swinging their blade and then blink forward so that the blade edge was just about to slice into their target's neck. I flew to our party's camp and sat down, far enough away to not throw embers from the fire because of the my wings move. Ray slipped down from me and went to make her report to Rovan. Did you find them? Rovan walked over to greet her and myself, acknowledging me with a nod of his head. Of course, Ray said with a grin, before becoming more serious. And I found redcaps. Rovan scowled at that and spat on the ground. Redcaps. Well, no wonder that Goblin tribe was able to cause so much trouble. How many are we looking at? At least 4, although you know how it is with goblinoids. If you see one, chances are there are a dozen waiting in the bushes behind it, but that hardly applies to redcaps. If you see 4 redcaps in a single small tribe, you have probably seen them all. Ray gave Rovan a rather impressive look. I was going to have to remember that one for when I hit a humanoid face again. It really got across the feeling of, please, stop being an idiot, so perfectly. Rovan raised an eyebrow, but Ray just kept up her look and he eventually gave in with a sigh and admitted defeat. Yeah. I won't make you say that you are going to have. Don't worry, there are only 4 redcaps. Add it to my tombstone as an epithet if I die to a hidden number 5. Are we still going to attack them? I asked, although Rovan lacked Ray's bond to me and so he only had my words to go by. For the record, I was well aware that how that question had actually sounded was, Awu, Sugra Oheku Haki HHMMMH. Rovan looked at Ray in confusion. I'll just be honest and admit that I have no idea what Hyuka is trying to say here. She wants to know if we are still going to attack the goblins. Ray responded easily, reaching out to pat my head. We are, Hyuka. You saw us get beat up by the Thunderbird and that freaky turtle, but against monsters that aren't city-destroying calamities we do pretty well. I mean, sure they aren't scary, nigh on mythical monsters, but teleporting assassins sounded pretty damn bad to me. My skepticism must have leaked through, because Elma scoffed from where she had been sitting and reading a book which she shut with a snap. You've just gotten to see a single part of how a team like ours handles a quest, Hyuka. She explained with a kind of slightly haughty arrogance that she actually pulled off quite well. Ray gathers information for us, and then we use that information to prepare. In this case, I think I can prepare a particularly nasty surprise for our redcap friends. Ilma tossed her hair back and smiled wickedly. After all, even though teleporting without an ability might be hard, messing up someone else's teleportation is quite easy. Chow Earl, of course, took this opportunity to take his teammate down a peg and bring up the story of how Imla learned to interdict weak teleportation. A tale that involved a blink dog, Rovan wearing the clothes and armor on the top half of his body, several jugs of alcohol, and a scar that Rovan still had in a private place. To add insult to injury, the blink dog had gotten away and then been adopted by a rich high noble who dabbled as a tamer for a hobby and now lived in luxury that the likes of the party could only dream of. Thankfully, my poor ability to speak stopped me from making a pun involving the word hindsight. Still, despite Ilma's magic, the redcaps would still be strong monsters. Technically, goblins were humans, but even most pedants generally just called them monsters. The distinction was theoretically important. Goblins could gain classes after all, but practically goblins rarely had a class beyond tribes member, cook, or scavenger. Even warrior or hunter were generally beyond them. Although chief and shaman were not rare in larger tribes. Gremlins, likewise, often gained classes like prankster or, at worst, thief. Hobgoblins, on the other hand, would often have more powerful classes, and older hobs could have uncommon or even rare classes. Redcaps were like hobs in that they also had better classes, but while hobs would have classes like warrior chief or maybe berserker, a redcap might have assassin or cutthroat. So they would be cunning and strong, and also supported by the regular goblins in the tribe. So Hyuka, Rovan spoke to me. Let me tell you how we kill goblins. Report, ghosts are all around us. Look for them, and you will find them. Ruskin Bond. The modern world is truly amazing, Soot whispered in the back of Timothy's mind. I can see why Hammer wanted to guide society towards this, and I can also see why she didn't have enough knowledge to do so. Timothy reflected on how surprisingly easy it was to get used to sharing your head with the ancient ghost of a famous emperor. He would have thought that it wouldn't be the kind of thing a person could go about their day and just be fine with, but here he was. It helped that Soot was rather quiet and seemed content to observe. According to the high necromancer, that was rather normal for a well-adjusted spirit. He had told Timothy that while he was attaching Soot to Timothy's soul, like stapling two pieces of paper together, it had earned him a new class, one that wasn't listed on the official class list online. Soul Archivist. It also came with a skill, Strength of the Ancients, which allowed Timothy to channel the classes and skills of a soul that he held within him after fulfilling certain conditions. For a brief period of time, Timothy could wield enough power to smash the bus he was riding into junk and then order the police to just let him go. Classes with that kind of strength were usually restricted and regulated, but with Dr. Smith's contacts in the Hunt East End, doing so was a breeze. So now Timothy was riding the bus to Dr. Smith's office at the museum in Hoot !Keepaw, and Soot was riding along with him. It seems odd that these vehicles seem to use very little enchanting, Soot remarked. Wouldn't it be far more efficient to pair science and magic? That was Hammer's speculation in the notes she left. Well, she wasn't wrong, Timothy replied to Soot in his mind. Magitech automobiles are far more efficient. A few models require so little fuel and so little maintenance that they are advertised as requiring nothing from the purchaser in terms of upkeep. The problem is that they are very expensive. We still haven't figured out a way to automate even moderately complex enchanting, so detailed Magitech is made by hand. Timothy got off the bus and headed inside, nodding to the museum employees as he headed into the back. So strange to see our lives put on display like this. So much of what we thought was wrong, why devote so much to primitives? Primitive? Timothy actually chuckled out loud at that one. Soot. Even with our education system, most people still end up ignorant and stupid. Ignorance is the natural state of humanity. What makes history worth looking back on is seeing the great minds that managed to push against the weight of humanity enough to advance it. The back rooms where Dr. Smith, and now Timothy, worked had been cleared of most of their samples. In their place were glass cases that held the carefully preserved notes of Princess Hammer, including the letter she had written early in her pregnancy, to be read if she did not survive. A letter that made wild, insane-seeming claims. To my dear husband? Soot, if you are reading this letter, I am probably dead. In truth, while I hope to survive this pregnancy, I very much worry that I will not. The priests can help, but they lack the skill and power to save lives in dire circumstances unless one of the gods reaches down through them for a miracle. I have not yet even begun to try and create a medical system yet, and so I fear that my survival will depend on me. What will happen, and since you are reading this now, it already has. I had not expected to come to care for you like I have. An arranged marriage for political purposes to a man with another wife. If I had been told that I would fall in love, and believe I was loved in turn, I would not have believed it. I had imagined our relationship far more like a business transaction, and I want to thank you for making it anything but. Which is why I have to apologize, because I have kept a secret about myself from you. I have thought for hours about if and how I should tell you. I have tried to just walk up to you and tell you, but lost my nerve every time. Even now, this is my last chance and I will never face your questions over it, but I still hesitate to write it down. As much as I wouldn't have believed that I would come to love you in our marriage, I can't imagine you taking my word on this, but I still want to try and tell you. The truth is that I am, well, I guess you would call me immortal. This won't be the first time I've died, just as this wasn't the first life I lived. This is my third life and I have no idea how many more lives are ahead of me. Our world, your world, is not the only one, but one of many. I cannot return to this world once I die, but I will be reborn into another world to live another life. In my very first life I lived in a world without magic or monsters. Without a system or classes or skills. I lived in a world of science and technology, where the mind of humanity had accomplished feats that our mages and priests couldn't even imagine. I wish that when I lived there I had paid more attention to what was around me, but it was only afterwards that I realized just how ignorant I truly was. I have left you my notes. They contain everything I can remember, anything that I thought might help. I hope that it does. I want you to know that I will remember this life, and you, always. With love for you and our child, Hammer. The rest of her notes though. They read like you would expect if you had grabbed a random person off the street and thrown them back in time. Dr. Smith and Timothy had pored over the notes and compared them to various developments in history, and Timothy started to wonder, how far would this world be if they hadn't been given these notes? By themselves, they were nothing special, but they were like giving hints to a puzzle. Would they have built the lunar city and the lunar warp gate yet? Or have developed clean magitech yet? Maybe, maybe not, but the world was undoubtedly changed by these words. But all of that was just the historical perspective, and that letter opened up a whole lot more possibilities than just knowledge of the past. It hinted at an infinite future potential. Timothy, however, was not sure if that potential was something they could seize. The team was made up of archaeologists, historians, and anthropologists, some of which also happened to be necromancers, but they weren't systemologists or physicists. Chasing a trail past the border of this world, how were they qualified to even attempt it? Dr. Smith believed that this was a necessary step to unravel the greatest mystery of all, the origin of the system itself. She wanted to understand the history of the system itself, and she had talked Timothy into accepting suit into his soul for that purpose. "Ah, Timothy." Dr. Smith greeted him as he walked in but hardly looked up from the documents she was poring over. "Good morning. How are you and His Highness faring today?" "I am well enough," Suit said to Timothy, who repeated it to the doctor. As for himself, "I don't have a lot of hope in this," Timothy replied. "What makes you think this goal is even possible?" Dr. Smith set her documents down and looked at Timothy as she steepled her hands. Her eyes were bright and focused, and Timothy felt uncomfortable as they scrutinized him. It almost felt like she was peeling him back, layer by layer. "Timothy, what do you think the system is?" Timothy blinked at the question, but answered readily enough, "No one knows, but the current best theory was that it was a semi-conscious akasha that connected mana subunits to quantum particles. Frankly, as far as near as I can tell, it is basically all guesswork." Hammer believed that the system was responsible for the existence of mana and magic, but she wasn't very sure. Suit remarked, "And that was another theory admittedly, but it wasn't the most accepted one. A working description, I suppose that it is good enough for the purpose of this conversation." Dr. Smith leaned back in her chair, although her eyes never left Timothy. "So let me pose a question to you. With historical-related classes like ours, could we change the past of the akasha?" "I suppose." Timothy paused to think. The akasha can be changed. Classes have come into and gone out of existence as society has evolved. However, I am not really sure how that would matter. Anything that is current would be unchangeable unless we could change everyone's opinions as well. All we would be able to do is change things in the past, a past we can't reach or affect. Can't we though? She rebutted with a smile. Chronomancy is a magical school. What is stopping us from reaching the past? You know as well as I do that the need paradox makes time travel all but useless, Timothy answered. If you go back in time to change something and succeed, the change will mean that you don't have to go back in time to change it, which will mean that you won't change it, and the whole timeline repairs itself effectively instantly. True, time travel to the past is effectively impossible. Dr. Smith smiled suddenly. However, we don't need to go to the past to reach it. The need paradox doesn't apply to personal time. That just results in the person who tries disintegrating. Timothy noted, the inherent stability issues of time travel due to the user's molecules being in the wrong location are exacerbated and they just turn to dust. Yes, if we sent molecules back in time. Ah, I see. She wants to send her own Akasha back in time while using her abilities in the present to alter it. That is genius. Suit sounded impressed, but Timothy still doubted it would work. So, what, you were trying to turn yourself into a primordial? Has this become a cult now? The Akasha would reject it, just as it has rejected every attempt to take control of it humanity has ever attempted. Timothy replied, for indeed history was full of attempts to gain control of the system. It never worked. It never worked before because everything was within the Akasha. Dr. Karen Smith's smile widened. There was nothing and nowhere that could avoid the touch of the Akasha, but now. Dr. Smith, let me speak frankly, Timothy sighed. Everything you have just said is built on hypothesis and vague ideas. It is possible that the system isn't an Akasha at all, or that it can't be moved through time, or that it won't cause a paradox and disintegrate you, or that everything you do works and you find out that the system is limited and you are unable to do more than, I don't know, change your class or something. This is not good science and it has almost nothing to do with history. And yet, I will be going through with it. Dr. Karen Smith's smile turned manic, and Timothy decided that maybe it was best not to argue anymore. He was starting to realize that there was more to his hero than he had ever believed. 6 months later at an island ritual site. Timothy shivered as the blizzard intensified. Why the ritual had to take place on an island near the North Pole, he had no idea. Over the past 6 months he had watched the professional and impressive workforce of one of the most famous scholars in the modern age had evolved into something resembling a doomsday cult. The hundreds of robed individuals chanting in unison didn't help deny the comparison. Well, we will know soon whether or not she is a genius or a maidwoman. Suit mused, not entirely concerned by what he was seeing. Of course he wasn't concerned, Timothy though. He had already died, so what did he have to lose now? Smith stood at the center of a gigantic ritual circle, drawn in the blood of dragons and guided by several chronomancers and systemologists. Timothy was watching the power gather. If he paid attention he could almost see the folds in the mana where time was twisted. Here we go. Suit said with anticipation as the ritual reached its crescendo. It exploded, and worse than Timothy had ever thought that it could. The mana rushed outwards and struck Timothy in a sudden blast. A bright white light blinded him for a moment, and when he opened his eyes instead of the wintry northern island, he saw a pleasant grassland as far as the eye could see. Ding. You have earned the achievement Otherworldly Traveler. What the fuck? Tobe continued. Thanks for Lestine.